I will go ahead and call the meeting to order. I am Melissa Herman, Chair of the Warrant Committee. Would all present members of the committee please raise their hand? All right, I would like to state for the record that we have 8 present tonight. Thank you for joining us this evening to participate in the annual open hearing. Residents should have received the full warrant in the mail, and there are also copies in the back of the room. Recurring articles that are standard year to year will not be reviewed tonight. We're now turning to the first item on the agenda, but before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I, the chair, will introduce each speaker on the agenda. Presenters will have 8 minutes to make their presentation. After presentations conclude, I will invite public comments or questions. The chair will first ask members of the public who wish to speak to identify their names and addresses only. Once the chair has a list of commenters, I will call on each by name and afford 2 minutes for any comments. Where possible, we will also allow for presenters or staff to respond to public comments. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. Further, please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. So for the next slide here, the open hearing presents the warrant articles for fiscal year 2024, which is July 1, 2023 to June 30, 2024, that will be voted on at annual town meeting Monday, May 1, 2023 at 7 p.m., and also Monday, May 8th as needed. Throughout the fall and the winter, the Warrant Committee met with the town departments and the schools to review proposed budgets and warrant articles. The financial amounts presented tonight are preliminary. The final recommended budgets will be in the Blue Book. For town budget guidance, each year guidance is issued to all town departments at the beginning of the budget season. Here are a few excerpts from that guidance. The Warrant Committee suggests that all departments evaluate FY24 budget requests in comparison to FY22 actual expenditures, along with FY23 budgeted amounts, and incorporate any significant changes based on such actual expenditures. And the Warrant Committee further strongly suggests that all departments submit level service or reduced expenditure budgets for FY24 apart from the effect of the increase in existing contractual or at-will salaries. And lastly, should a department budget request be above level service, the department should submit a separate request entitled Additional Service Request and provide specific audible supporting detail and a justification for each such request. So for this year, we have 30 articles. 15 of them are annual or recurring articles, and 15 of them are special or non-recurring articles. Of the 15 recurring articles, 4 do not require expenditures, 11 do have associated expenditures or financial implications. Of the 15 non-recurring articles, 7 do not require expenditures, and 8 do have associated expenditures. So on the next slide here, we have a list of the recurring articles. And on the slide after that, these are our non-recurring articles. Please note that Article 17, which was included in the warrant, is expected to be postponed to the June meeting. On the next slide, we have articles without associated expenditures, both recurring and non-recurring. And then the slide after that, we have the agenda for this evening. So for this evening, we will plan to cover Article 4, which will include a presentation with an overview of the operating budget, and we'll also hear on the Dover School Committee and the DS Regional School Committee budgets. We'll have a presentation for Article 5 on capital, which will lead into the DS Regional Schools capital request. We'll have a presentation on other financial articles. We have 2 presentations, Article 18 and 19, on Planning Board bylaw changes. We will have something that's not on the list here. Article 20 from the Conservation Commission is proposing an amendment to the wetlands bylaw, so we'll hear briefly on that. Then we'll have Article 28 about the citizens petition regarding installing sidewalks on Cross Street. Article 29 will be incorporated into the section earlier in the agenda with Articles 8 to 16. So with that, I will now turn it over to Carl Valenti, our interim town administrator, to review Article 4.
Good evening, everyone, and for those folks I haven't met already, my name's Carl Valenti. I'm the interim town administrator, and I've been asked to cover a couple of things in my comments this evening, to talk about Article 4 specifically, which is the operating budget, but probably more importantly, to talk about the overall budget, overall where things are going with our expenditures, including capital. I should mention that I was off last week, and of course I did my presentation before I left, and during the week some numbers got better and some numbers went in the other direction. So I'm going to give you a few updates from what you'll see here on the slides. So on this first slide, in terms of the requested budget, so sort of two things here. The operating portion of the budget, the funds town departments and so forth, that's up about $1.4 million or 3.4%. The overall budget, and this again is a new number from what you're seeing on the slide, which includes capital and so forth, that's now looking at about $2.2 million increase. We are clearly seeing the impact of inflation. A good number of our increases in the budget are inflation-related items. Some things that you see in terms of fuel, and certainly some things around our salary costs. Having said that, we still have a significant amount of unused taxing capacity. Again, this number here, the estimated unused capacity, has been revised just as of today based on the new numbers, but it still looks like we'll have $2.3 million of unused tax capacity. Less than last year, where it was $3.7 million, but that was an actual high for us. This number that we're projecting for fiscal 24, $2.3 million, is just about the average that we've had for the past 4 years. So we're still in a strong position in terms of unused taxing capacity. Next slide, please. So what is driving the increases? So for the operating budget, and this excludes the schools because you'll hear about that separately. There's 6 items here that's driving the operating budget. The ambulance budget, we're finding that we need to increase the stipend we pay to our on-call EMTs so that we have coverage on weekday coverage, which has always been a challenge for us. We're looking at a new part-time position in the building commissioner's office. Third, in the highway department, we're looking for 3 new positions there, a foreman, a mechanic. We no longer have a mechanic. We want to add that back in so we don't have to contract out that work, and a business manager. Fourth, within the planning department, some professional fees for part of the village center rezoning and some natural resource protection rezoning. Within technology, and I should add as anecdotal, we've been without our internet, ours been on and off for the last 4 days, so technology is a high priority for us. So we're going to be looking to expand our support services contract for about $24,000. And then the big one, health insurance costs. We've been in a very good position the last 2 years where our health insurance costs didn't increase at all. They were completely flat. But now we're seeing a 10% increase. The rates for next year were just set by our regional consortium. We're looking at a 10% increase in our health insurance costs are about $260,000. Next slide, Mark. On the capital side, we've seen a significant increase in requests for capital projects for the coming year. Nearly $3.8 million has been requested. This compares to last year, fiscal '23, where we had about $1.4 million in capital requests. So a significant increase in our capital budget committee has been hard at work in terms of trying to whittle that down, looking if we can delay some of the items a little bit so that it doesn't all hit in one year. But we're finding some significant increases of very badly needed capital items. So the major drivers here for capital. At our Chickering School, some improvements at the school at $175,000. The Dover Sherborne school improvements, Dover's portion of that at about $650,000. A big item for the fire and ambulance. They have some of their normal just improvements to equipment, but they're looking to replace a fire engine, a 34-year-old piece of equipment. And these days, a new engine, which will take us 2 years from the time we order it before we even get delivery, but it's almost $1 million for that piece of equipment. In DPW and highway, again, some of the typical stuff, but the big item here is the Claybrook Road reconstruction. We'll have firm bids on this before town meeting, but our estimates right now is that Claybrook Road project will be close to $1 million. Fifth on the list, a number of municipal improvements, particularly around some heating and ventilation systems, some roofing systems at about $160,000, and then lastly, a couple of pieces of recreation equipment for $102,000. So you can see that the capital is really one of the big items that's driving the increases in our budget. And again, we're continuing to work with our capital budget committee to see if we can make changes to try to smooth out some of these increases. Next slide, please. Use of reserves. So we're in a fortunate position that we have significant reserves, and particularly around free cash reserves. Last year, the Board of Selectmen, the Warrant Committee, and the Capital Budget Committee came up with a 5-year plan on managing our reserves. And so we're continuing to follow that model of that plan that was approved. That includes continuing to use some of our reserves to reduce the impact on the Carroll Community Center debt exclusion. So the impact meaning the impact on our taxpayers. So using $690,000 of our free cash reserves to reduce the impact of that debt exclusion. Second, to put additional funds in our stabilization fund. Again, this is part of our policy, adding $170,000 to our stabilization fund. Third, for our regional school OPEB stabilization fund. Again, per our policy, we'd be adding $721,000. The goal there that the selectmen have set is trying to fund 60% of that liability. So OPEB, for those of you who don't recognize that acronym, that's the health benefits that our retirees are due when they retire. And many communities now are trying to set aside funds today to help fund that health benefit for our retirees. So again, according to our plan of trying to get at least 60% funding of that over a 10-year period, we'd set aside $721,000. We'll continue to use our free cash to reduce the tax rate or to stabilize the tax rate. And per our policy, we would ask town meeting to approve using $1,200,000 to provide tax relief. And then lastly, of our many capital projects, right now our recommendation is to use about $1 million, a little less than $1 million, to help fund our capital projects. And then lastly, just to wrap up, there's still a couple of big unknowns that will come before town meeting. The first is on the Carroll Community Center. So I think probably many of you know that when we went out to bid last year, our bids came in for that project significantly above what town meeting had approved for that. So the selectmen have voted to call for a special town meeting in early June. We will rebid, or we're in the process of rebidding the Carroll Community Center building project. So we'll have new hard numbers by the time that special town meeting comes forward, but right now that could be anywhere between $2 and $4 million. And then the last unknown is we're negotiating with the Hale property owners to purchase a conservation restriction. If that goes forward, that would be a special town meeting in the fall, and that could be several millions of dollars. Our estimate at this point is, given the size, that the cost of that particular purchase, we could only probably do that if not only town meeting approved it, but if the voters approved a debt exclusion to fund that project. So those are sort of the two big unknowns. So that's sort of an overview, big picture of what's going on. Again, a lot of these numbers, if you heard from Melissa, are still in flux. We're still working at it, and we'll continue to do that over the next 3 to 4 weeks. We expect a lot of these numbers to really solidify over that period of time. And I don't know, Melissa, do you want to take questions now, or did you want to wait if there are any?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So we will get into the capital items separately with the Article 5 presentation, but any questions or comments at this time? Yes?
Connie Akins, do we have any idea what our free cash balance is?
We don't, Bonnie. Last week was our goal to try to get you that estimate, and I was telling somebody else here tonight, our whole system, a computer system, and went down Wednesday afternoon, so we weren't able to finish that piece of work. And it's still down, unfortunately, so I don't have that information for you tonight.
Any other questions? And please state your name and your address when you come up. Thank you.
Hi, Charlie Long, 121 Walpole Street. My question is relating to the Highway Department. Now, the last highway superintendent we had also served as fire chief. He did 2 jobs. Apparently, the new highway superintendent, who's now called a director of public works, apparently he can't handle 1 job all by himself. He's got to have 3 more people. Now, this town has barely been growing at all, and I think it's bizarre that we're talking, well, a business manager, what's his job? He ought to be the business manager for his department. I mean, please, what's going on here? Adding 3 positions, administrative positions, to a department that really doesn't need it? A foreman, isn't he the foreman? Doesn't he the guy who tells them how to do the work out there? What else is he doing, just sitting in his office? Come on. This is beyond unnecessary.
Okay, in the back, if you want to come up, please.
Yeah, hi, I think I have a loud enough voice.
Okay.
Okay, just in Hagan Street. Yes, I totally echo what Charlie's saying. I think it's absolutely appalling, the amount of staff position capital requests that are coming from the new highway superintendent. It's a lot of people, think everybody in Dover is making $1 million. I've been a volunteer, by the way, 6 years in the school committee, open space committee, et cetera. So I know you're doing the best you can, but I think we need some reality checks on their capital items. And then my question to Carl, you mentioned Hill Reservation as a override. Are there any other overrides that are anticipated here? So he would go to the ballot box to actually decide whether they want to spend this kind of money.
Yeah.
That's the ballot box, not that town meeting.
Sure. Thanks, Justine. So at this point, no, there aren't. I was talking with the chair, Robin Hunter, earlier about the what happens with the Carroll Community Center, and we just don't know at this point what the increase is going to be. So I guess with that caveat, because the board really hasn't taken it up yet, but Hale would appear to be in that category. We're not sure about Carroll Community Center yet. You're welcome.
Anyone else? Okay, great. Thank you, Carl. So at this time, for the second half of Article 4, I'd like to welcome Sarah Gutierrez Dunn from the Dover Schools Committee and Mark Healy from the Dover Regional Schools Committee up to discuss the school budgets.
All right, good evening. My name is Sarah Gutierrez Dunn, and I am the chair of the Dover School Committee, and I'm pleased to be joined by Mark Healy this evening from the Regional School Committee. We are pleased to present to you this evening the budgets for the Dover and Dover-Sherburne Regional School Districts. And we believe these budgets not only serve the evolving needs of our students, but do so in a way that is fiscally responsible to the town of Dover and its taxpayers. We're grateful also to be joined in the evening, this evening in the audience by our Superintendent Beth McCoy and our Business Administrator Dawn Fattori, both of whose leadership and guidance are invaluable assets to our schools and by extension to our community. First, let's turn to the assumptions that have guided our budget planning. Thankfully, the pandemic has continued to recede this year, and we have seen a return to more normalcy in school, and so we are planning for regular school operations with level enrollment across our two districts. We take seriously the town's budget guidance and respect the need to be prudent with our resources, and so we have planned for level service. We're also guided by our district's strategic plan when setting these budgets. Many of us, myself included, have chosen to live in Dover primarily because of the strength of our schools, and so we want to continue our tradition of academic excellence under our strategic plan. And that strategic plan breaks down into 5 main elements. First, innovative teaching and learning. We want to maintain the excellence and rigor for which our schools are known, while also adapting best practices and programs to prepare graduates for success in a rapidly changing world. The health and well-being of our staff and our students. In addition to first-class academics, we also focus on educating the whole child and providing programs that support the social and emotional needs of our students and staff. We want to cultivate partnerships with families and within our communities to strengthen our school's support system. We evaluate and adapt our facilities to make sure that they are not only safe, but also innovative spaces where our kids can learn, create, and play. And we want to be efficient with our resources so as to provide the highest quality education in the most efficient and productive manner. And last but not least, while we are grateful to have come to a place where the pandemic is perhaps less at the forefront of our daily lives, in our budget planning, we are also mindful that we are continuing to address its effects on our students. And so we have factored that assessment of student needs into our budget assumptions accordingly. And I'd like to turn it over to Mark for a discussion of the key budget drivers.
Thank you. You can see that about 80 to 85% of the operating budget comes from payroll and related benefits for staff. And bulleted below that in these four bullet points speak to kind of the key contributors that we're facing this year. All units are currently in negotiations for their new contract. And you can see the increases factoring in cost of living and step and lane changes amount to about a 4 to a 9.8% salary increase across these contract negotiations. Second bullet, we're expecting a few new hires for next year, including educational assistants at Chickering, a literacy specialist as well, and an athletic trainer for the region. We do expect some offset with salary savings as some of the more experienced veteran staff retire. We could hire younger staff, which would likely come at a lower salary cost. And the last bullet point, continued funding provided by, as was mentioned, the OPED liability trust, some employment benefits for retired staff, such as health care plans. Second key bullet is continued trend budgeting for all other operating accounts. We see increases in special education, contracted services for Chickering, instructional technology, devices and software, and utilities. And finally, student enrollment, though remains level, projections are about 515 students for Chickering and 1,131 for the region. And Dover's regional assessment percentage of students for FY24 is down from FY23 from 53.55% down from 54.8% enrollment. Thanks.
So turning first to the financial statistics for the Dover School District. Our total proposed operating budget for the Dover School District for fiscal year 2024 is $10.78 million. And our budget can be broken down into two main components: our Chickering operations, or what we call in-district, and then also spending for Dover students age 3 to 22 whose needs dictate placement out of district. For our in-district, the proposed budget totals $8.2 million. And as you can see here, by far the lion's share is salaries, followed by other educational expenditures, which includes textbooks, technology, software, supplies, and then our transportation and buildings and grounds costs. For out of district, we are projecting $2.56 million, representing tuition and transportation costs for approximately 18 placements. Altogether, this represents an overall increase of 3.94% for fiscal year 2024 as compared to fiscal year 2023, after a 0% increase from fiscal year 2023 over fiscal year 2022. Offsetting these costs to the town, we will receive from the state both Chapter 70 revenues as well as a circuit breaker reimbursement that covers out-of-district tuition and transportation costs for the prior year. And so all told, the net estimated taxpayer cost in district will be $14,022 per student.
And at the region, some financial statistics. You can see the total proposed operating budget for the region is $27,972,540. Fiscal year 23, it was $23,813. And it's broken down by the 5 bullet points: salaries and benefits, other expenditures, transportation, building and grounds, and debt services. This represents a budget increase of $948,727, or 3.51% over fiscal year 23. And Dover's assessment, however, decrease is $4,458, or 0.03%. Total assessment is $12,954,938. This decrease is based on Dover's regional enrollment percentage as of October 1st, 2022. So the percentage decreased 1.25%. And revenue from the state for Chapter 70 and 71, which is transportation, along with use of excess and deficiency funds and fees for various student activities, contributed $3,808,004 to the operating budget. The net Dover and Sherborne taxpayer costs per in-district pupil estimates out to be $21,365, including all cost benefits, debt services, etc.
We are so grateful to live in a community that makes such a significant investment in education. As the saying goes, it really does take a village, and we would be remiss not to thank all those who have made donations this year to broaden and enhance the student experience, including the various PTO organizations, the Mudge Foundation, DS Boosters, Friends of the Performing Arts, and others. Next slide, please. And in closing, we would like to extend our sincere thanks to the town of Dover and its taxpayers for their continued support in educating our students. We are so proud of our schools and the mission we share to inspire, challenge, and support all students as they discover and pursue their full potential. Thank you for your attention this evening, and for any of you who might like a deeper dive into these budgets, please know that the public budget hearings that were held March 9th for the Dover School Committee and March 7th for the Regional School Committee are accessible to view via DSC TV. We are also happy to take any questions.
Okay, there appears to be no questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next we can welcome Barry Goldman for the Capital Budget Committee and Article 5.
Good evening. I'm Barry Goldman, Chair of the Capital Budget Committee. And I'd like to give you an overview of the Capital Budget Committee's commitment to Dover.
Barry,
Our fixed assets are...
Barry, would you mind?
Okay.
Thank you.
Everybody's taller than me. Dover's fixed assets include over $100 million in buildings and $20 million in vehicles, furniture, fixtures, and equipment at present values. This will increase by $19 to $22 million upon the completion of the new Dover Community Center. The Capital Budget Committee is responsible for preparing a capital budget program for use by all town boards and officials in their deliberations. Annually in September, every department submits their initial request for any item in excess of $10,000 that needs to be acquired, renewed, or replaced. The committee meets with each department for due diligence review and discussion, after which we provide our recommendations to the Warrant Committee and to the Selectmen for inclusion in the town meeting warrant. In addition, the committee requests and reviews a 5-year capital budget projection from each town department and from the Regional School Committee. The Capital Budget Committee establishes replacement guidelines and a due diligence program. We develop objective standards to determine optimal lifetime expectancy for capital assets. To develop and refine our due diligence, we confer with departments and employees, town officials, and other similar towns, and outside construction and equipment experts. We review original documents, including feasibility studies, plans, designs, equipment bids, grant laws, legislation, applications, and specifications from engineers, architects, vendors, consultants, and the Commonwealth departments. Special emphasis is placed on environmental issues, efficiency, and cost savings. Next slide. This is the list of capital budget items that have been requested. There are 19 separate items this year, totaling $4.4 million, a record amount for the second year in a row. We have approved 1.6, with 2.8 million remaining. This is 500% to 800% higher than our average capital budgets during the last decade. There is a confluence of events that has occurred. our aging infrastructure and equipment, most of which was acquired or built more than 20 years ago, environmental issues, natural disasters, flooding, erosion by the Charles River, and smaller culverts and waterways, high inflation, substantial increase in costs and equipment, supply chain issues, limited public bids, and regulatory requirements. And the Highway Department has requested replacement of its entire fleet that have been in use for dozens of years, and for reconstructing infrastructure at a cost of at least $8 million over the next 5 years. For FY24, major requests are $1,168,000 for the fire department, $1,800,000 for the highway, and $647,000 for regional schools. These three departments account for 88.5% of the total capital budget for FY24. Normal capital budgets are assumed to be 1.5% to 2% of the operating budget, but our projections are now running at 7 to 12% of the $40 million operating budget. There are several major pending capital requests for FY24 that have not yet been approved. The Highway Department, $1.8 million, is still pending the receipt of additional due diligence information and the potential application for additional grants. We are working with the Highway Department to spread the costs over several years. Also, we are suggesting hire an outside expert to review each piece of equipment and assist in the determination of mechanical condition, repair costs, and remaining useful life. The region's request for their 20-year-old original equipment for HVAC is still pending receipt of additional technical and efficiency information and the possible application of a grant from Green Communities. Next slide. This is the 5-year projection. Over the past 10 years, Article 5 has averaged approximately $450,000 per year. It is now projected that the total 5-year capital expenditures will be $19,100,000, which averages $3,825,000 per year. That's 9.5% average of the operating budget. We expect this to peak in FY25 at $5,230,000, but continue at elevated levels through FY28 and thereafter. This larger expense reflects the fact that most town buildings and equipment have reached maximum useful life and require improvements. As an example, the 100-year-old townhouse is currently undergoing several renovation projects and is due to have several more. Looking forward, we see projected increases FY25 through 28 of new roofs for Chickering and regional schools, turf fields for regional schools, highway continuing their program to replace trucks, culvert infrastructure, and the fire department is proposing to replace their aging fleet, for which they have agreed to an extended replacement schedule. In FY27 and 28, projections reduced to $2 to $3 million, but these levels are now the new normal since the highway departments and fire departments will continue to replace their equipment, keeping the levels high. Next slide. The Green Communities Grants projects. This provides us the opportunity to replace older, less efficient assets with new high-efficiency ones, which are eligible for subsidies from $200,000 to $500,000. We not only reduce the amount of energy used, but also have a long-term asset at reduced cost. We have several projects in process. Where Dover qualifies, we intend to file green community grant applications for all of these projects. Dover has already received approval for $500,000 for the Carroll Community Center, and we'll be working with the town of Sherborne for grants for the HVAC improvements for the region. In addition, we hope to be eligible for a grant for HVAC for the town library in FY '25 and '26. Possible green community grants could be from $900,000 to $1.2 million. Next slide. Infrastructure grant projects. Applications are being prepared by the Highway Department for several infrastructure grants available for upcoming projects. The two major projects are the reconstruction of Claybrook Road and the Noannet culverts at Willow and Dedham Streets. The town has been approved for a grant of $178,000 for the design of the Claybrook project. The reconstruction is under discussion, and if qualified, a grant for up to the full estimated amount of $1 million may be requested. A feasibility grant has been approved for the Noannet culverts, and a grant application is in process for the design and cost of the project for an additional $1.1 million. Funding strategy options. We suggest bonding. All items over approximately at $1 million or over. We will apply for all grants available to offset costs. We make sure and do sufficient due diligence to make sure that replacement is absolutely needed. We evaluate whether to delay purchases and spread over more years. And the balances would be funded by tax levy. Thanks to the members of the Capital Budget Committee, the Warrant Committee, and the Board of Selectmen, all of whom have partnered with us in the capital budget process to achieve the best outcome. I look forward to any questions that you might have.
Any questions? Okay, yes?
Could you come up because I can't hear you?
Just because the clicking.
Struck by the DPW's really huge request for the next few years, including, I mean, replacing all of the equipment will end up costing us that much over 5 years?
Well, we are looking at it. We're reviewing it. We haven't approved anything for this year because we're continuing our review and our due diligence. We would like to have somebody come in to review the condition of the trucks. There are a couple of trucks that are incredibly old, and there's one in particular that may not pass the next level of use.
And we also have to notice that we've had increasingly mild winters and that ice and snow removal seems to be much less, and that had always been a big part of our budget.
Sure. I can't address snow removal because that's an operating item.
Okay.
But we will continue to not only look at the equipment requirements, but also we are reviewing all of the infrastructure requests, and we will do our best to make sure that the costs are correct and that all of the grants are available.
Robin?
Robin Hunter, 7 High Rock Road. Just in response to that woman, what I wanted to add was the DPW equipment replacements. It's not just equipment. There are a lot of infrastructure projects in this town that we just absolutely have to do. You know, not repairing Claybrook Road is just not an option. So I think for us, for capital budgets, maybe we should break that out in the next presentation.
Thank you. Come on up, please.
Again, Justine, your campaign Street Ferry, thank you for all this hard work. I think it's overwhelming. I certainly wouldn't know how to evaluate whether things are needed or not, but I think that's an excellent idea to actually go over the equipment. Now, remind me, I thought we had just spent $1 million 2 years ago on a new fire truck. I don't quite understand. Am I correct on that? Didn't we just spend 2 years ago? I don't have a list of all the items and
We did an ambulance, but not a fire truck.
And it was $1 million, right?
No,
900,000. Well, I can't.
no, the ambulance was 292. Okay.
All I'm saying is that you've done very well, I think, in general, as far as healthcare costs being aggregated with regional entities or even statewide entities. I would love to see more regionalization of things pertaining to capital items. I think it's absurd, in my opinion, to have all these little towns, Sherburne, Dover, Medfield at 14,000 people, Sherburne at 4,000, Dover at 6,000, each having duplicate sets of buildings. That's just a comment, and I didn't see regionalization in there, but maybe that's something you guys are talking about.
We have had some discussions about regionalization of services. So it's more complicated than one would think, but we are starting in that area.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Barry. The next item on the agenda was Article 6 for the Dover Sherburne Regional Schools capital, but that was incorporated into Barry's update. And so we'll move on to the next item, which is Carl again, with some of the other financial articles.
So I'm going to work through this pretty quickly. There's a number of other financial articles, fortunately very few of any substance. Article 2, which is required by state law to vote elected officials' salaries, there's no material changes there. The town clerk's salary, which is a full-time position, has been changed to reflect our new compensation plan that the Personnel Board approved this past year. Article 3 is revolving funds. We have to get town meeting's approval to spend the fees that we collect for a number of programs. Again, nothing material there. The Council on Aging is looking to increase what they're authorized to spend from their fees to $40,000 from $35,000, just as a result of offering new programs and more programs. Article 8 is what we set aside for unemployment compensation. We're in a very strong position is that we have very few unemployment claims, and that would remain at $10,000, that appropriation. Article 9, which is a sick leave buyback program for retiring police officers. That program has historically been funded at $10,000. Last year, or the year we're in now, fiscal 23, we didn't need to set aside any funds because we didn't have any retirees, but we are expecting some retiring police officers, so we're requesting $10,000 for funding that, which is again historically what that's been funded at. Article 10, this is just to get approval to spend the money we get from the state for our road program. So there's no funds involved, it's just getting your approval to spend those state funds. We're estimating, based on the governor's budget, that we would receive $280,000 in what's called the Chapter 90 road program to maintain our roads. Article 11, the amount we set aside for the Conservation Fund. There'll be no change in that. That would continue to be funded at $25,000. Article 12, setting aside funds in our general stabilization fund. This is based on our policy that was approved last year, and to set aside just over $170,000 in that stabilization fund. Article 13, this funds we set aside for the Dover-Sherborne OPEB liability, our portion of that. Again, what I mentioned earlier, the goal is to try to get 60% funding over 10 years, and that would call for setting aside $721,000. Next slide. Article 14, these are for one-time projects. We're requesting $125,000 to develop a communications plan for the town. We're finding that our residents are looking for new and better ways, that we implement new and better ways of communicating with them. So using a professional firm to help us develop a communications plan, and equally important, to update the town's website. Article 15, prior year bills. So these were items from bills from prior fiscal years that were not submitted in time to be paid, and that requires town meeting approval. Currently, we're seeing about $5,000 for some prior year bills that need to be paid. Article 16, amending the operating budget for fiscal '23. At this point, we have no requests to make any adjustments to our fiscal '23 operating budget. Article 17 was a request by the Recreation Commission for funding for the Carroll Community Center for a couple of items within that. The Recreation Commission will be withdrawing that article at town meeting because we expect that to be on the town meeting for the special town meeting in June. And then lastly, Article 29, this is the free cash we use each year to stabilize the tax rate, to provide tax relief. And per our policy and our plan, at this point, we're still recommending that $1.2 million be used for that purpose of stabilizing the tax bills and the tax rate. Thank you.
Okay, any questions on any of these articles? Okay, thank you. So for the next two, we have Scott Friedman and then Jody Shu. And because we're coming together, we have a total of 16 minutes for the two presentations. So whatever Scott doesn't use, we will yield to Jody. So Scott, I will hand it off to you for Article 18.
Great, thanks. Good evening, everybody. I'm Scott Friedman from the Planning Board, and I'm here to talk about the changes to the floodplain bylaw. So the National Flood Insurance Program is managed by FEMA, and it enables homeowners, business owners, and renters in participating communities to purchase federally backed flood insurance. This offers policyholders an alternative to disaster assistance through the government, which may not be available from other sources, and it helps to meet the escalating costs of repairing flood damage to buildings and their contents. So participating communities, potentially ours, agree to adopt and enforce floodplain management ordinances to reduce future flood damage, and the insurance policies, which, as I said, are federally backed, are available to residents and business owners in high risk to and moderate to low risk areas. My colleague Laura has done the diligence on this and identified an estimated 40 local buildings are located in the floodplain district and thus require flood insurance. These property owners have been notified and received a copy of the new bylaw. This next slide shows the flood insurance rate maps, just to give you a sense of what we're talking about. The areas in blue are technically in the floodplain and would qualify for the FEMA insurance through this program if this bylaw is adopted. These maps are updated every 5 to 10 years. Updates to this map are expected by December, so we'll be bothering y'all again about a year from now to adopt those changes. No changes to any maps are included in this proposed bylaw. This is just an example of what the current map looks like. So, summary of the bylaw updates. So we'll be updating section 185.44 to align with the new state model bylaw and to remain in compliance with FEMA and the National Flood Insurance Program. This includes new requirements, definitions, and clarifications on work limitations within flood zones. Our next slide has a bit more detail on this. And for what it's worth, this bylaw has been reviewed by Eric Carlson, who's the Massachusetts Flood Insurance Program Coordinator, as well as Town Council, to ensure compliance. So the notable updates are the designation of a community floodplain administrator, which in our case will be the building inspector, zoning enforcement officer, permitting requirements for development within the floodplain district, requirements for recreational vehicles, a requirement for the town of Dover to submit new data to FEMA when available to be incorporated into the updated flood insurance rate maps, which, as I mentioned, are expected by December. And then lastly, standards for variances. So last slide here, the voting implications are we need a 2/3 majority to pass. Dover and its residents will continue to participate in the National Flood Insurance Program, and affected residents and property owners will have the ability to purchase this federally backed flood insurance. If it fails to pass by a 2/3 majority, Dover may be deemed ineligible and removed from the program, thus adversely affecting the owners of these 40 identified local buildings. So this bylaw is really about taking care of our neighbors. Any questions? Great, thank you.
Okay, no questions. Thank you.
Good evening. So Article 19 refers to accessory dwelling units, and we're proposing an update to the existing accessory apartments bylaw that's already on the books. Is there a button? No. Oh, okay. Okay. Dover already allows for what we refer to in town as accessory apartments in some circumstances. This is found in section 185.43 of the bylaw and was approved at town meeting in May of 1986. Accessory apartments are currently permitted under certain circumstances in certain districts with oversight from the Zoning Board of Appeals through the special permit process. Right now, accessory apartments are an option for homeowners who live in houses legally occupied on or before January 1st, 1985, and caps the existing bylaw caps the total number of accessory apartments at 10% of total housing stock in town. So, good question. Why are we thinking about, you can go to the next one. Why update the existing bylaw now? We hear a lot from residents about housing options in town and concerns about challenges to finding housing that is flexible for changing family needs. And in a town that is as obviously expensive as ours, we believe it's vital that we tap into the flexibility that accessory dwelling units offer to a range of people. People like older adults who want to stay in the community and would benefit from rental income or a family member sharing costs, families with caregivers for young children, disabled family members or otherwise, young adults moving back home while they set themselves up to get launched into their own living situations, and families, of course, who want to or need to welcome elderly parents, which is a scenario that we all experienced or were aware of during the recent pandemic. So we believe that this is a really good time to update the existing bylaw and make accessory dwelling units an option for more homeowners in town. So as these housing needs continue to evolve, and our bylaw continues to be looked at, we think we can continue to improve upon it. Our goals are 5, and we've specifically outlined them here. Number 1, just build upon the existing framework that we have in our bylaw and allow it to evolve and meet the needs of more residents and homeowners. And in doing so, create a flexible housing option that more residents and homeowners can take advantage of. But to do so in a way that safeguards the residential character of this town that we all love, limits impacts on town infrastructure, and streamlines the approval process for more residents. So just to level set here, an accessory dwelling unit is a term that is well established. The term accessory apartment is currently on the books, but we're proposing as part of this bylaw to update that to the more current and more commonly used across the Commonwealth term accessory dwelling unit. It's a residential living unit that is subordinate, and that's the key term, to the principal residence on a single family lot. It's a self-contained unit that is accessory, as I said, to the primary residence and has its own sleeping, cooking, and sanitary facilities. It has a separate entrance. It's, as I said, subordinate to the principal dwelling and can be found in either attached or detached settings. So for example, you might find an accessory dwelling unit in a converted interior space like a basement or an attic. It can be found in a converted garage, a barn house, carriage house, lots of different ways that you can do this, and you'll see throughout the bylaw that we refer to attached or detached, which literally means what it sounds like, attached to the primary residence or detached. So you can see a couple of examples here. It's probably a familiar idea, one that many people are aware of. You might also hear them referred to as in-law apartments or even granny flats, gaining popularity in Massachusetts and beyond. And in fact, over 40 communities in the Commonwealth, Dover among them, now allow ADUs. So as we've discussed, we do have this in our bylaw framework already, but the existing bylaw has these limitations that we think need updating, as you can see here in these bullet points. So time to update them. So when we go back to those goals that I outlined in an earlier slide, next slide please, you can see that we're really trying to map each of those goals to what we're trying to do here. So if we start with build upon the framework and create flexible housing options for more residents, we're addressing in the bylaw update, number 1, allowing ADUs in homes built after 1985. So the current bylaw limits it. If you live in a home or own a home that was built or was not occupied by January 1st, 1985, then ADUs are not an option for you as a homeowner. We also have a cap on ADUs. We don't actually, it turns out, keep track of ADUs that carefully in town, so that's something we want to propose happens also. It's not part of the bylaw, but we're not near that cap. So we're removing the cap, the 10% cap, as a mechanism for just, again, opening up this option for more homeowners. When it comes to numbers 3, 4, and 5, streamlining and safeguarding and limiting the impacts on town infrastructure, a few things here. So from a streamlining perspective, the current bylaw requires that anybody who wants to get permitted for an ADU, whether in their basement or their attic, or even in a detached garage or a barn that might be on their property, has to go through the special permit process. So it begins with a site plan review at the planning board, and then ultimately goes to the zoning board of appeals for approval in all cases with the current bylaw. We are proposing to change that so that if you want to build an accessory dwelling unit in your primary home within the residence, you would only need to come to the planning board for a site plan review. If you want to build an accessory dwelling unit in a detached structure, like a barn or a carriage house, then we would maintain the current requirement that that go through the special permit process and would be overseen by the Zoning Board of Appeals. And it's worth noting that we've reviewed this with the Zoning Board of Appeals, and they have no issues with it on policy, and we had a great and constructive meeting with them. So that's a little bit about streamlining. When it comes to safeguarding, which would be this, you know, we want to be really careful and make sure that we continue to
have enough oversight so that people can be confident that we're going to maintain the residential character that's so important here in town. We are, of course, only allowing ADUs in residential districts. The site plan review process is part of every single ADU application. It's worth noting that in 2022, the planning board conducted 26 site plan reviews. We really do this a lot. We know what we're doing. We have a very specific and outlined framework for site plan reviews, so we feel comfortable that that process specifically for attached ADUs is a really smart solution for streamlining for homeowners, but the special permit process stays in place for detached structures. The size limitation for ADUs is a question that's come up. It's currently 900 square feet max. That's the allowable max size for an ADU, and that does not change with this bylaw update. Owner occupancy is another issue that's come up, and the current bylaw does not actually specifically state that an ADU has to be owner occupied. And again, as a safeguard, what we're proposing in this bylaw update is a requirement for owner occupancy of either the principal residence or the ADU. Number of ADUs allowed on a single-family lot does not change. The maximum remains 1. And short-term rentals is actually, this is really interesting, not currently specifically prohibited in the existing bylaw, but we're proposing to specifically prohibit short-term rentals, which are less than 30-day rentals, for accessory dwelling units in town in response to resident concern about Airbnbs and other potential uses of these units. So we feel really strongly that we're answering and addressing a lot of the concerns that have been raised to us in our many meetings on this topic. And we appreciate all the feedback because we think it's made for a better bylaw update and one that's really specifically meeting the needs of Dover residents. In addition, I think it's really important to note that these safeguards continue because every single building code and zoning bylaw that impacts home renovations or any new buildings in Dover would apply, as they do now. They continue to apply to ADUs. For example, zoning requirements around lot coverage, septics and wells, setbacks, you name it. All of the relevant boards and departments who are part of the process for permitting in Dover remain involved and don't lose any of their oversight when it comes to ADUs. Next slide. So as with Scott's presentation, we're just showing voting implications for town meeting. If this bylaw passes by a simple majority at town meeting, which is 50% plus 1, the updated accessory dwelling unit bylaw will replace the existing accessory apartments bylaw. If it fails to pass by a simple majority, the existing accessory apartments bylaw will remain in effect on the town bylaw, and so we will continue to allow for ADUs in Dover, but only in homes that were built or legally occupied on January 1st, 1985. So welcome any questions, and thank you for your support or your consideration of this bylaw.
Please.
Pope Hoffman, Rocky Brook Road. Back in the 60s, I was a student at Babson College, and I lived in a ADU on a property in Dover. No need to mention the address, but there were 2 of them. So under this bylaw, you only allow in 1. What happens to a property, to the owner of the property, if he has 2 and they're both occupied? Do you go to the owner and say, hey, kick one of these people out?
No, my understanding on all of these bylaw updates is that they apply to applications subsequent to its passage.
Okay. You probably said that, and
No, I don't think I did. Thanks for the question.
Yes, please come up.
Kay Peterson, 25 Wilsondale Street, from the Board of Health. The Board of Health met this evening and would like to see a change to item D, paragraph 3, which is a little bit more explicit about the review. I'll just read what we proposed. The Board of Health Well, for any renovations or new construction related to an ADU, and we would delete the term attached ADU, it should just read any ADU. The applicant shall obtain all required approvals from the Board of Health consistent with ensuring compliance with state and town regulations regarding water and septic.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, we appreciate that, and we appreciate you all having a discussion about it. And I think it's a great edit, and our town planner, Laura Harbottle, has that information already, and we'll make that change. Thank you very much.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you. So at this time, we would invite John Sullivan from the Conservation Commission to give a brief update on Article 20.
Good evening. Basically, the two items that we're dealing with in Article 20 are housekeeping, taking some things that were done in the late 20th century and moving them up to now. The first one addresses our current regulations require any applications that come into Conservation Commission that paper copies be distributed throughout the townhouse and any other boards that might be involved in the review. And this allows us to cut down the paperwork a bit. We typically get these applications in via email now, plus they do generally mail or drop off several paper copies. The current regulation requires 7 paper copies. We're running out of space, and we'd like to basically get permission to send out a few to a few of the more salient boards, and the rest would all be emailed. So I hope no one has an objection to that, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions concerning that. Okay, and then the next one is another housekeeping. What we've encountered recently is another regulation from somewhere in the 1990s, it looks like, where for some reason, there was a limitation on the cost of outside peer review consultants. These are consultants who review on behalf of the town applications for notices of intent or development within a 100-foot buffer of a wetland. And over the years, we're starting to have more, not commercial, for-profit requests coming in front of us, such as subdivisions or 40Bs. Applications, and they're generally on parcels of land that may have had one single-family residence at one point. That residence is being removed, and then they're requesting additional residences, roads, things of that sort, or in some cases with 40Bs, apartment buildings. And generally, this is on land that is, one would have viewed decades ago as being more marginal. People wouldn't have tried to develop that sort of development that close to a wetland. And so there's much more stormwater management, much more review of things that could potentially harm the wetlands because there's much more development closer to the wetland. And we're finding that we're also the only board in town that seems to have a limitation on the amount of money that can be requested from an applicant to review their profit-making proposal. And that current limitation is $5,000. And interestingly, I don't think we bumped up against that until maybe sometime in the last 5 years. And so what we're looking to do is to still maintain the ability to use outside consultants, but basically delete the $5,000 limit so that town residents aren't responsible for covering peer review of someone who's coming in trying to put in a larger scale development or a development that is on what might have been viewed as a more marginal piece of land. And generally, this has very little bearing on single-family residences. This is not, this is not a matter of someone who comes in and wants to put a porch on. We don't need a consultant for that. So, are there any questions concerning that? Okay.
Okay,
Thank you. I still have 6 minutes.
Did you prepare a song or anything for tonight? Thank you. I appreciate it. Okay, so next we'll call up Rick Guerin for the citizens petition, Article 28.
Hi, my name's Rick Guerin. My wife and I live at 28 Valley Road, and we are the owners and operators of Precious Beginnings Preschool. We have a third grader at Chickering Elementary who seems to really enjoy school, which is good. Thank you, Deb. What I'm going to do is pull up the presentation because I don't want to just speak to the slides, if I can. I mean, I don't want to be staring at the slides and have to do this kind of thing back and forth. Okay, so as you can see, there's a warrant article. I don't think I need to read it. Many of you probably already read it. But we're asking for a sidewalk, not on the entire length of Cross Street, but only far enough from the Center Street intersection where Cross Street is to where Chickering Land is. I believe that access was possibly used at some point for maybe during construction. So let's go to, you can see from the slides right there that that's an aerial view of the entire project. Okay, you want to go to the next slide? Okay, and that shows the actual painted sidewalks or painted crosswalks at the termination points of the sidewalk. We would look for something on that side of the road. So let's go to the next slide. Why do we need a sidewalk? Generally, let's see if I can get this to turn on me. There we go. Eliminate existing issues during weekday morning hours when pedestrians are in the roadway while elementary staff are arriving for school and buses. Parents are dropping off children. There has been a dramatic increase in drop-off traffic at Chickering Elementary School from September 2020 to present times. This coincides with the earlier start time of 7:50 and most possibly COVID, why there's been an increase in traffic. Let's go to the next slide. Access, safety. Provide safe walking to and from the center of town or anything in between for Chickering Elementary students. Center Street pedestrians will have safe walking access to Chickering Fields, Carroll Park, tennis courts, etc., which would be through Chickering Elementary, where there's already walkways existing. Additional crosswalk at Center Street and Cross Street will provide safe walking for residents who live on the north side of Center Street. That's the side of Center Street that doesn't have the sidewalk. Who currently only have access to one crosswalk, which is down by the library at Dedham and Center Street intersection. Design, let's go to the next slide. Okay. It should look like existing sidewalks and walkways in Dover. The anticipated design of this sidewalk is to avoid impact on any existing fences, trees, mailboxes, utility poles. For comparison, the Center Street sidewalk has 12 direct abutters. This sidewalk would have 3 abutters. And pictured here is the utility pole closest to Center Street and the abutters fence at the corner of Cross and Center. So, pictures sometimes make everything look either smaller or bigger. Between the utility pole and this fence is approximately 5 feet, and the anticipated hope is to try to keep this to a sidewalk that looks like Dover. Let's go to the next slide. Pictured below is the corner of the fence of that particular abutter and the next second utility pole. As you can see, there's room that's not encroaching, not on top of the street. And as you look further up beyond where that utility pole is, to the right there's an open area that could easily, based on what I've seen on Walpole Street and Center Street, access to put in a 5-foot wide sidewalk right there or crosswalk. Next, let's go to the next slide. Pictured below is the abutters at 7 Cross, and the next, which is the third utility pole. Again, you can see there's a mailbox for 7 Cross Street, and well, I'll just talk to the picture. Where the mailbox is a large oak tree, and then to the right there's a pine tree. There's plenty of room before the fence to easily kind of go right around that particular area without impeding the tree. And then you see the next utility pole. There's room there as well. Let's go to the next slide. Pictured below is the abutter 11 cross and the next fourth utility pole. As you can see in the first picture to the left is plenty of room to put sidewalk area. And then as you approach the next utility pole and mailbox, again, you can go around that mailbox and onto the driveway further on. Now the next slide, pictured below is the approach to Chickering property and the access to the grass groomed area. Again, this was a pace distance of approximately 700 feet on Cross Street. And it doesn't go far enough to where the entrance to Chickering is. So that slide on the right, you can see it's a grassed area, and there'd be room to put in a walkway to get to where that grassed area is. Let's go to the next slide. For comparison's sake of an existing sidewalk, pictured below is a portion of the sidewalk on Center Street. As you can see on the left picture, the sidewalk goes around a tree, and then if you look at the slide on the right, the sidewalk actually goes up onto the property, 20 feet onto the property at 34 Center Street. So most likely when they put in the Center Street crosswalk with the 12 abutters, they had to obviously get some level of notification to the abutters and deal with that. I'm not familiar with municipal law in any way, shape, or form, and not knowing how sidewalks are constructed. I mean, I've seen them constructed in Dover, but I'm not familiar with the logistics of actually constructing a sidewalk. I'm just going on what I see. So I'm relatively naive as to possibly the reasons why we don't have a sidewalk that joins the lovely Center Street sidewalk to Chickering Elementary. Let's go to the next slide. Possible funding. Municipalities have received funds for sidewalk projects for schools from both federal and state sources. The U.S. Department of Transportation, Safe Routes to School program. It was Kevin McCabe actually turned me on to that, who's the current, I think, person in the Highway Department that's heading up the Highway Department, Kevin McCabe. And then there's the Massachusetts Department of Transportation Shared Street and Spaces program. Okay, frequently asked questions. Next slide. I heard one of the reasons for the sidewalk projects enable safe travel for elementary families to access after-school programs. Is that true? Yes. Having access to a sidewalk would help facilitate opportunities for children to attend after-school programs at our facility, Precious Beginnings. Most Precious Blood, that would be the religious education classes. Town library, next year, possibly the renovated Carroll Center and other destinations within walking distance. Why do pedestrians, especially during morning hours, choose to walk on the western side of Cross Street? That's right as you round the corner. And primarily their destination is the Center Street sidewalk on that south side of Center Street, so they're not on that other side of the street. Why add a sidewalk on a street that's been a scenic road since 1910? The proposed design is minimally invasive. Also, given the existing aesthetics on Cross Street, it would help allow additional opportunities for upkeep. Okay, let's go to the next slide. To-dos. We are currently waiting on a quote from an engineering firm for design. Once received, we'll have a better understanding of design and potentially construction costs. Like I said, I'm relatively naive to municipal projects, but I'm sure there are certain people that have a good reason why they don't want a sidewalk, to join the Center Street, and I'm certainly interested in hearing some feedback. Any questions?
Yes, come on up.
Kate Canny, 7 Cross Street. I was given a heads up about this about 6 weeks ago, and I've spent time calling departments and trying to get any information, and it started off with a call to the townhouse, which side of the street, because the Warrant article doesn't even tell you that. So we've been doing our own research. Convenient photographs, I'm going to have to say, leaves out a lot of the trees. There are 9 trees on our property that would potentially be cut down, or you'd have to go around. If you go around, you're going closer to our house. Public works projects should be vetted. and the culverts, Claybrook Road, those have all been vetted. Departments, committees, boards, all weigh in. And before this becomes a cost to the taxpayer. And grants are lovely thoughts, but they don't always happen. Through my research, I actually found sidewalk guidelines on our website, proposed and put in place by the planning board in 2008. And an interesting thing they stated, that generally new sidewalks should be 4 to 5 feet wide. They should be located away from the edge of the road pavement, preferably 4 to 8 feet. So it's not 5 feet, it could be potentially be 9 feet. And if you look at 7 Cross Street, 9 feet is on the other side of our fence. It's on the past our trees. So I'd really ask, when we think about this thing, and we have a really great opportunity with the Village Center Committee that's going to be looking at the potential of connecting neighborhoods with sidewalks. That's a better opportunity for grant opportunities to propose for these things. Sidewalks shouldn't just be for an individual, a small group of individuals, a business. They should be well thought out. We have less than 5 miles of sidewalks in Dover. We have scenic roads. We've done this for a reason, so I would ask people to really think carefully about the need, the impact, and the cost. Thank you.
Come on up, please.
Hi, my name's Steve Lanzicki. I'm at 11 Cross Street. So similar, I just learned of this proposal yesterday. So shame on me for not paying attention to the meeting minutes here. But in my research, I went back, there were minutes from the March 1st meeting, and Mr. Garin was asked to get assurances from the owners that would be impacted. I haven't heard anything. I have no idea the impact. I also think the width of the sidewalk, if you do it at its minimal 4 feet, it's going to look like it does at the end of Center Street right now, which has frost heaves, and the upkeep is unclear. The impact from snow removal, my maintenance, I have no idea. I'd like more information. I would have liked to had some warning about this before something potentially gets voted on. The comments about safety, I mean, from my perspective, it's self-serving from a business owner that basically wants to connect to the elementary school and trying to get funding. Chickering's already connected to all the downtown, the library, through sidewalks through Dedham Street. It's actually a more direct path than going up Cross Street. Potentially putting elementary age children to cross Center Street. I think that was even a question that came out of the minutes last time. That's not something I would put my kids through. So, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. Yes.
I don't have a horse in this race, but I would say our street, Haven Street, is, and I don't know about Cross, but I know the first thing one does is to find out where the verge is, where the town name is. And, you know, I assume someone must be onto this before you start contemplating sidewalks. And I guess my other just observation, one of my neighbors across the street from me recently contacted the highway department to simply have some brushes cleared on his property, which is fine, and now people can walk on that. And it's no sidewalk, it just has cleared some brush. So I'm not sure why we need a whole sidewalk, but I'm just saying if you're gonna build something, you should know where people's property is and, you know, get their permission. And certainly when the sidewalk on Center Street went in, it was because the majority of the people wanted it. You don't seem to have that situation.
Would you like a few moments to respond?
Yeah, sure. Well, I can tell you that I talked to 2 representatives of the highway department. One was like, well, who had some history with the Center Street sidewalk, said that I don't even know why we didn't go to the elementary school, but He did seem to indicate there was a specific reason why it only stopped at Cross Street, but it wasn't clear to me what that reason was. I guess, secondly, I've walked this a number of times over the past 13 years, and that's good news that I got from the abutter at number 7, that I thought the sidewalk had to be 5 feet, so 4 feet that's even better.
It has to be 5 feet, it has to be 4 feet in from the curb to the start of the sidewalk. So it's 9 feet.
Okay, well, then I guess that'll have to be looked at. Again, I spoke to Kevin McCabe and I talked to somebody else in the highway department, so I have no familiarity with municipalities and how they handle these kind of things. I mean, I approached the highway department back in January and went over this with them, and they didn't give me any. I mean, if they're the ones that should know the sidewalk bylaws, I guess, but nobody informed me about it. Another thing I want to address is I heard the resident from 11 Cross Street say that this was self-serving. I'm going to tell you right now, this has nothing to do with self-serving. 3 families approached us back in September who don't have after-school care. And to be quite honest with you, I'm not crazy about the idea of providing after-school care, but our license allows children up to 10 years of age. I can tell you, quite honestly, we're not making any money by serving additional families after 2:30. Primarily, we're a preschool. So this sidewalk is not about me. It's about the residents of Dover. And when I asked the families who attend the schools, they seem to be really positive about it. Now, if I offended anybody, I certainly didn't mean to. That wasn't my desire. When I asked the highway department about this, they said I should go talk to somebody in the town. And basically, when I found out that the warrant closes January 13th or something like that, I was just in a hurry to kind of get things together. So I didn't mean to offend anybody if I did. But I can tell you this isn't about self-serving. This is not about me. I'm telling you right now, it's not about me. It's about these children that need after-school care. Now, one of the advantages of having a sidewalk is I can't legally, or let's say liability is too great for me to walk up to Chickering Elementary and to receive children, then walk down Cross Street without a sidewalk. We didn't have much snow this year, so maybe I could have gotten away with it. But in good conscience, I couldn't walk children from the elementary school down the street. And again, this isn't about me. If the town, I believe this should go to town meeting. I'll get more information. But if the town doesn't want this, then I'm okay with that. I mean, it is what it is. This is my 3rd time trying to find a way to help the families of Dover get after-school care. I tried talking to the school department, and they don't allow that kind of activity, dropping off at another bus stop. I called Connolly Bus Company, basically saying it was impossible. So this is my 3rd attempt. So if it fails, then I know not to pursue this anymore. But it is about safety. It's not about me trying to trash anybody's property or a self-serving effort on my part. So there you go. I still believe whether or not the warrant committee recommends it or not. What I heard from the highway department were all positive comments. They didn't think it was going to be they just said if you get the information from an engineering firm, so be it. And I'm going to get that information and I'll present it. Hopefully I'll have it soon. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Any further comments or questions? Okay, thank you. So that concludes our agenda for tonight. Thank you all for coming out tonight, and a huge thank you to the committee, to Carl, Felicia, Mark, Jim, and the others who have helped to prepare for this evening. The annual town meeting is scheduled for Monday, May 1st at 7:30 p.m. and will be held in person. The details and all the materials from this evening will be posted on the town website. Did you? Yep.
You're going to have a warrant committee meeting before the special meeting.
We are. Okay. So For the members of the Warrant Committee, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Do I have a second? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you again, everyone.
We can throw this away. I printed this.